All right, I'm pleased to be joined by Eric Vegoe of Gopher Puck Live. He's been covering the Gophers on the University of Minnesota for a long period of time, and he is someone who's very familiar with Chaz Lucius, who is going to be making his Portland debut on Friday. So with that, welcome in, Eric. How are you doing this evening?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so I know you've had the opportunity to cover Chaz for a while, both with his year at the University of Minnesota, but also kind of tracking a little bit his development as he kind of prepared to come to the University of Minnesota. Overall, how would you say you would describe Lucius's game, and what type of player is he when he's on the ice?
Lucius has so much natural scoring ability that it just draws your eyes when you watch him on the ice. He finds his way into space to create scoring chances. He's got a great release. He's got a long reach. He's got a good heavy shot, and he just has a knack for scoring goals. He does really well when he plays with other good players who can possess the puck and do the dirty work, winning pucks. And on the power play, he's really good on the flanks, operating there. But I think those are kind of his big strengths on the ice. And we saw flashes of it at Minnesota. There were some injury issues that have popped up in his career to date. But when he's on, he can really put pucks in the net.
Yeah. I guess is that the scoring ability? Is that maybe something that Winterhawks fans are going to be maybe most excited to see with him? Is he kind of a game breaker? Is he someone who wants the puck on his stick? Is he kind of a player who can kind of be that top line player for a team and maybe kind of break a game open?
I think especially against players his own age, he's always kind of struggled where he's always played against older kids, whether it's with the AAA teams at Gentry Academy where he kind of started off, or as he got to the program in Ann Arbor, and then with the Gophers, he's always kind of playing with a year or two ahead of him or 3 years ahead. And so I think it was hard for him sometimes to make impacts in those types of situations. But you saw him in the World Junior as an older player really flash and make plays on the rush and in the zone. I think that's where he can make his impact. Sometimes when you see him in those other age tournaments like the U17s, he can really drive play. And in those situations, he's done really well. I think he's struggled a little bit playing with older players and then trying to make it in the AHL with trying to make his mark by himself against those more experienced players. And that's just the growth that he needs to go through as a player.
So do you see him with him coming to juniors and kind of being one of the older players? The Western League here, they cap out at 20 years old. And so a lot of these players look at, kind of their 19-year-old season as kind of being kind of the veterans. So you think that will probably benefit him? You kind of mentioned some of the injury concerns. Some of these college programs, like Mankato's and St. Cloud's, they've got guys who maybe are 22, 23 years old, kind of grown men that he's playing against, especially in the AHL. And there's been some injuries, and even this year, leading up to World Juniors.
Mhm.
Do you have any concerns about kind of long-term injury and kind of his ability, or do you think by going up against guys more his age that he'll be able to kind of stay healthy?
I think playing against kids his own age is definitely going to help him stay healthier and gain some confidence. Some of the injuries he's gone through are kind of freak bone things. Like he had this bone lesion in his knee that created some issues. He had to have surgery for that. He had a broken hand, had to have some procedures to help that. He had an issue in his foot, had to have something with that. And they're all kind of, bone injuries, which when
Sure.
you talk to strength and conditioning people, you can't really help those. Now, the shoulder issue, that's something different. And that's maybe trying to make a step too quick to the AHL against those big, heavy players who are really experienced. So I think stepping back and playing major junior in the dub is going to be great for him because he will fit in perfectly with Portland, I would think, on the power play, top line scorer. And he's a player that wants to play center again. I know that wasn't something that he was able to do at Minnesota just because of the depth Minnesota had at center when he got there, but his playmaking ability is something that would fit that position.
Yeah, you kind of touched on that a little bit. How did Bob Motzko like to use him? Obviously Portland, or excuse me, University of Minnesota was pretty deep up front, and they are again this year, especially with Snuggerud and Logan Cooley and Matthew Knies, which is just an incredible line. And I know Portland fans have asked, because Jimmy Snuggerud was also drafted. Matthew Nyes was a list player of Portland. I think there's been a lot of connections between Portland and Minnesota over the years, and obviously those are two very different paths for a player to choose. But how would you say that Bob Motzko liked to use him, and especially on the power play? Because one of the areas that Portland is not necessarily struggling right now, but that their power play has kind of been in a funk. They don't really kind of have that go-to guy. They've got a good net front player, but they don't really have someone who can, kind of really shoot the puck from the flanks, or, they're trying to set up some of these one-timers, but they're not quite clicking quite yet. I guess overall, how would you say Bob Motzko used Lucius while he was there?
Well, Bob gets kind of cautious with how he uses these young, pretty much straight to college freshmen, and he kind of gives them a little bit at a time and sees how much they can handle. And he set him up with a great situation with Matthew Nyes, who's a great prospect for Toronto, probably could be in the NHL right now if he wanted to, but he wanted to come back for another chance with Minnesota. And he put him with Ben Myers, who was probably the top sought after undrafted free agent last year coming out of college hockey, who signed with the Avs because he wanted to push himself. And so when Bob put him with those two players, Lucius just had the benefit of being able to feed off them and find little holes to create offense. And when he was in the lineup and healthy, he was able to do that. Now, on the power play, because Bob was kind of sprinkling ice time to Lucius right away, he didn't really get a chance to make his mark. And then as he comes back from injury, the Gophers started to have some chemistry on their second unit where Lucius might have been able to fit in, and there just wasn't really a spot for him there. So I think Minnesota fans missed out on some of that power play potential that Lucius has.
Yeah.
But he's definitely got it. You can just see it. I went to a lot of practices and you could just see that flash and that skill.
Yeah. I think, from following your work at Gopher Puck Live and just kind of following the Gophers in the NCAA, Bob Motzko, I think, talks a lot about getting the ground game going. And, Portland likes to play like kind of with a track meet kind of style. They like to kind of push the pace, kind of push the play and kind of get up, go and get pucks in, generate chances off the rush. How do you feel Lucius's skating style may fit in the Western League compared to like what you've seen in the NCAA?
I don't know if I'd describe Lucius as a game breaker with his skating, but it's good enough where he can keep up with the play. And then it's his lateral movement, I think, that separates him. He's able to move laterally to create shooting lanes that aren't there initially, where he's able to change the pace of his rush to create bigger gaps than you'd expect. Some guys, they just know how to play one speed. But I think Lucius has kind of figured out, sometimes you got to be like Mav and hit the brakes and let him just fly right by you. And he's got that ability to see that conceptually and execute it. Yeah.
How about on the defensive end? I know, Motzko likes to kind of shield some of the freshmen as best as he can, but when Lucius comes here, he's going to slide into that top line role. And the Winterhawks have had a couple good centers right now, but how do you feel that he'll do kind of in the defensive side of the game? From what you've seen.
I mean, I definitely think it's an opportunity for him to have some growth at Minnesota. You look for him to maybe win a few more battles and get engaged a little bit more physically.
Yep.
We just didn't see enough of that. And I think part of that's that age gap where he's 18 and he's going up against 24-year-olds sometimes. I remember his first goal with the Gophers. He was like one of the youngest players on the ice, and he's competing against one of the oldest players in college hockey. And Lucius won out and got the goal. So he does have that ability to battle against those kind of players. It's just he needs the experience, and that's why I think the dub is going to be perfect for him.
Yeah. Portland's got a pretty good strength and conditioning coach in Rich Campbell here, and I know that the University of Minnesota's got is it still Cal Dietz?
Cal Dietz, yep.
Yeah, who just I think those are two really good types of players or coaches that help players kind of grow and mature. How do you see Lucius's kind of off ice conditioning and things, and how have you kind of seen him grow from the time when he maybe first started, and maybe you didn't quite get to see that second season with maybe when Cal Dietz can really kind of work some of his magic, but is that the type of player though that is willing to kind of put in some of that piece and kind of that work in practice? And it's going to be a little bit different going from NCAA where you play 2 games a weekend to now Portland's going to have a stretch of 4 games in 5 nights. It's a little bit of a different kind of style of playing hockey and things, but how do you feel from a strength and conditioning standpoint Lucius is developed?
It's hard to say exactly how well he developed at Minnesota just because of the injury things that go on
Sure.
in his career. But one thing Cal talks about is that first year is almost like a learn to train season where you just build a base. And he's been robbed of that a little bit with his injuries that he's had to rehab from and come back from. I don't really see him as a player that has issues with conditioning.
Okay.
You'd like him to add a little bit more strength. And so maybe he gets a little more explosive. But I think those are all things that just come with a young player developing.
Yeah.
And his scoring ability is something you can't teach. And it doesn't depend on speed or strength. It's his brain that really makes it happen for him.
Yeah. Is that what I think, we've touched on it, but that's probably what Portland is going to look for most is, I think kind of the stat that has been thrown out there is you think this guy could be a, 1.5 to 2 point a game player in the Western League. He's, like you mentioned, he's played with some really good players. I think he's going to come into Portland and be pretty clearly, with no offense to their current roster, he's going to be the top of the, he's going to be the go-to guy when Portland has basically kind of rolled four lines. They've got some pretty cerebral guys, but not with the type of players that you're talking about, like with Ben Myers or Matthew Nyes. So do you see him as someone who can maybe kind of help drive the line, or is he best as kind of a support piece? And do you think he may be looking forward to the opportunity to being the go-to guy? Because even with his time with the national team, there's a whole bunch of really good players on that program as well. Is this maybe going to be the first time since he's been at AAA that he's going to be the guy on a team?
Well, I think even with the development program team, he was one of the go-to goal scorers and he can drive a lot of offense. And he's also good enough to recognize when the defense really starts coming to him and
Yeah.
taking away his options, he's able to see outlets. So I really think that he's going to have no problem being a go-to scorer. I
Yeah.
mean, point of game, I think, is the floor with him as he gets comfortable. And then as he gets to know his line mates, that 1.5, 2 point a game thing is definitely there waiting for him. I mean, this kid is somebody who's basically been almost like a professional since he was about 15 or 16.
Sure.
His family basically started a charter school for hockey to help his development and playing in AAA tournaments while that school got its footing. And now they're a team as a high school that's playing in our state tournament. Wow. Year to year. I mean, he's just kind of jump started that program and that family has started that, and it's been really successful. And it's allowed him to get a lot of experience in the game. And I don't think he'll have any problem adjusting.
Yeah. One of the other kind of last comparisons that I'd make is University of Minnesota is a very mobile defense unit. They like to move the puck. I think he's played with Jackson Lacombe for a big chunk of time. Ryan Johnson, guys who are really good at kind of moving the puck up the ice. Mike Kester, guys like that who are pretty mobile. And Portland's, they're not a big, heavy, defensive core. Do you think that will help him as he's kind of used to that style of, being able to accept those long breakout passes and being able to kind of support kind of a more mobile defensive unit? Because Mike Johnson here likes to really have his center almost sometimes, play back closer and almost act as a third defenseman. Do you think that will help him given his experience at Minnesota?
I think he's going to want to lean more towards that wing who's getting down the rush and flying the zone. We didn't see a lot of him playing, center type positions below the dots, supporting the D as that third guy back there. He's more of a guy who wants to get up and go north as quick as he can. Yep. and get those rush scoring chances. So he's definitely used to those dynamic defensemen who can get the puck off quick and really start the transition or any kind of turnover. Guys are looking to go north. Lucius is definitely one of those types of guys.
Sure. I've asked all my questions. Is there anything else about Lucius that I might have missed that you've seen or that you think Portland fans should be aware of this player?
I think just be aware that he is pretty much a pro. Like the way he handles the media, the way he handles the fans, he is a very mature player who I think can handle kind of a lot of pressure on him and whatnot. And I know Bob Motzko kind of compared him a little bit to Thomas Vanek at Minnesota, who won an NCAA title and just poured goals in the net in college hockey and went on to score lots of goals in the NHL too. And he's just got that flair for scoring big goals, and he shows emotion when he scores the big goals, and that can really get a team going.
Yeah. For people who want to follow you and go for Puck Live, I know there's a lot of, people who are going to be watching and listening to this of, are keep an eye on Winterhawks prospects, but if they want to kind of get in and learn more about the University of Minnesota and kind of the NCAA hockey, what's maybe the best way for them to kind of maybe get connected or follow along with Gopher Puck Live?
Yeah, best way to follow me is my Twitter. It's eVego at Twitter, and then at Gopher Puck Live is our website. We do a weekly podcast, pretty much live every Wednesday night at 9:30 Central Time, and we get guests on from other schools, writers that cover the team, and we really talk a lot of college hockey. Like this week, we'll have one of the beat writers from the Michigan Daily on to talk about our big series coming up with them. Sure. And we try to do that throughout the year. And as we get closer to tournament time, we'll have some bigger guests as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And, I think, one of the things you do is you do a beer of the week. Beer is pretty big out here in Portland. Do you have any hoppy beer recommendations that you could throw that you might know that is maybe out this way that, fans could maybe try to, are you into any of the hoppy beers?
I am very much into the hoppy beers. It's hard to know exactly what from our area is traveling out nationally. Sure. Surly Brewing is kind of the big one right now that's spread its wings a little bit, and they make a double bladed Axeman, which is a double Citra hopped beer that's like 10.8%, comes in a pint. It's a great hoppy beer. Axeman's one of my favorite regular IPAs. And I kind of tend towards more of that straight Northwest IPA, that piney citrus stuff. Steel Toe makes a really good one too, size 7. So if anyone's ever in the area, those are two definitely to look for.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time here. And we really appreciate you kind of, shedding some light for us on Chaz Lucius. And, that will, as we get to see him for about, 30 or 40 games and plus the playoffs. So we really thank you for your time.
All right. Enjoy it.